Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. We appreciate you taking the time today on a wonderful evening in Syracuse to hear 1 year later the progress that's been made on the City of Syracuse Police Reform and Reinvention Plan. The Oversight Committee of this plan has been working hard with the administration for the past year to continue to ensure that we meet the items and meet the milestones that we set a year ago. And so I appreciate your being on today, and we look forward to the presentation and a healthy discussion after. With that, I'm happy to bring to you Mayor Ben Walsh.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Really excited to be here with all of you. I want to start out by thanking you, Deputy Mayor, for all of your work in overseeing this process, both specifically as it relates to the Oversight Committee, but all of our other police reform work. So just to give everyone some historical perspective, and I also, of course, want to acknowledge the Oversight Committee, all of you individually. All of you have your own full-time jobs, and you have been very gracious and giving with your time. And I think the work product is a reflection of that. So thank all of you. But yeah, for that historical perspective, when we look at the work of this administration regarding police reform, I look at it in a few different phases. This administration came in 2018. One of the first things that we did was initiate a nationwide search for a new police chief. Chief Fowler had indicated that he was prepared to retire. He gave us 1 year so we could make sure that we had a comprehensive process that engaged the community, and so we did that. And again, with the deputy mayor leading the way, had a lot of community meetings, got a lot of input, and heard a lot of the concerns that we've been working to address through this process. That obviously led to the hiring of Chief Buckner, and we were able to use that all of that input and community feedback to really charge Chief Buckner and his team with prioritizing police reform and reinvention. So that work was well underway when, of course, we had the tragic murder of George Floyd. And that's when the nation's attention really turned to the topic of police reform. And while we were certainly hard at work on the subject already, admittedly, we needed to accelerate that progress in order to heed the calls of the community, and we did that. And that led to a number of specific actions. On my behalf, it led to the issuance of my first executive order, which included 16 specific actions relative to police reform. Shortly thereafter, Governor Cuomo issued his executive order, which led to the development of the Syracuse Police Reform and Reinvention Plan, which then, of course, led to the creation of the Oversight Committee. And over the past year, despite the fact that the topic may have not gotten the same amount of attention as it did during that stretch during the summer of 2020, we have tried to maintain that accelerated progress in this area. And again, I think what you all will hear tonight is that we've accomplished a lot, but still have quite a bit that we want to accomplish. Acknowledging, as the deputy mayor and I have always tried to do, that police reform and reinvention, it's a fluid, ongoing, dynamic process. It never ends. But we want to make sure that there is continual forward progress. So again, that's what we look forward to sharing. Again, I want to thank the deputy mayor. I want to thank Chief Cecil. I will note that with his new appointment as chief, which we're very excited about, one of the first conversations we had, which was about how do we make sure that we continue this progress that we've been making under his leadership. And I have full faith and confidence that Chief Cecil and his team are fully committed to this work. I want to thank Councilor Majuk, who is wearing a couple of hats as he usually does. He's, of course, the chair of the Common Council Public Safety Committee, but he's also a very active and valued member of the Oversight Committee. And again, want to thank each individual committee member for your time and your effort and your investment in this process. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it back over to the Deputy Mayor, who will take it from here. But to everyone tuned in, thank you for tuning in. And again, this will be recorded on YouTube, so those that aren't able to join us live will certainly be able to check in after the fact. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mayor Walsh. At this time, we'll have Chief Joe Cecil.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Welcome everyone who tuned in. I just have a few things to say. I'm a man of few words, as everybody knows, but this entire process has edged two concepts into my mind and most of the folks who worked on this process at SPD. One of them is that transparency is our friend. I've worked under 11 chiefs, 11. Some were very good at transparency, some were not so good at transparency. But you could see during those periods of the chiefs that weren't good at transparency, you could see the relationship between the public, the community, and the PD suffer during those periods of time. I took note of that as I was moving through the ranks, and you could clearly see that transparency is our friend, that when we were transparent with the community, the relationship with the SPD and the community was better. And so I took that away. I took that from this process because there was a lot of transparency going on with a lot of different things as this process went on. And the second thing, of course, is the collaboration. The collaboration with PD and our community partners on policies, procedures, and training, which turned out to be gold, in my opinion, because ultimately we ended up with better, stronger policies, stronger procedures, and even stronger training that we implemented in the academy and in service to the current officers we have. This happens whenever you surround yourself with folks that have different perspectives than you do. You end up with a win all around because the policies and procedures and the trainings become stronger because of those perspectives. Again, and this just circles around into the whole transparency thing as well. One of the examples, and I know Barry Gawanti is going to speak about this, I think that's on one of her slides, is Voyance. We had never even heard of this software, this powerful software that allows us to speak with the 86 languages that happen to occur throughout the city of Syracuse until she brought it up. And we looked into it, and as we stand right now, we have officers trained on it. It's in their cars, and we're using Voyance right now when we go to a situation where someone who from the immigrant population, the new American population, has been a victim, and we're struggling with how to communicate with that person and get the necessary information we need to investigate it. Just one example of how transparency and collaboration has helped us build better policies, procedures, and training. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. So with that, we will begin our report from the Syracuse Police Reform and Reinvention Oversight Committee to the public 1 year later. So why an oversight committee? Community members identified the need during our process for developing the Reform and Reinvention Plan. We heard from community members, and those community members said that words on paper are fine, but we really need to ensure that there is a process that ensures that the city of Syracuse and the police department are true to their word and true to what we've committed, written in that plan to meet the requirements of New York State Executive Order 203. And so out of those public meetings, that suggestion was embedded within the plan as an item, as a milestone, to convene an oversight committee to be assigned and overseen by the mayor's office. As a result, it is part of one of my responsibilities as deputy mayor to oversee and ensure that this group meets, the committee meets on a regular basis, and we meet monthly to ensure that the committee has the information that it needs, to ensure that there is open feedback and two-way conversation with committee members and the administration. And as you see, the committee has been meeting monthly since May of 2021. I also want to say, before I move on, excuse me, that the format tonight is that we will go through our slide deck. We don't anticipate more than 25 minutes at the most, and then we're going to open it up for your questions so that we can answer about what we presented about the plan as a whole. So our committee members, the committee is comprised of a mayoral appointee, David Chaplin, Common Council appointee, Barry Gawanter. Ramon Jordan is the Director of Housing for the Department of Neighborhood and Business Development. Third District Councilor, Cho Majoke, who also serves as the Public Safety Committee Chair. Myself, Deputy Mayor Sharon Owens. Our CRB Administrator, Raynette Relaford. Sergeant Mark Russin of the Syracuse Police Department, who is my right hand on this police reform. I have to give him a shout out tonight. And also coming on board, our new Corporation Counsel, Sue Katzoff, who's unable to be with us today due to a family commitment. So there are 6 components to the plan: transparency and accountability, community engagement and relationship building, policies and procedures, training and wellness, diversity in hiring and advancement, and alternatives to policing. Tonight, we will go over each one of these areas. There are 33 milestones. We will be highlighting at least 2 or 3 of them in each category during the presentation, or we would be presenting 33 milestones, which I'm sure you don't want to sit through. To start, transparency and accountability.
Good afternoon, everyone. Raynette Relaford, Administrator for the Citizens Review Board. So the public-facing dashboard that you will see provides the community with a history and details on the governor's order, the mayor's order, and the Syracuse Police Reform and Reinvention Plan. It provides regular status updates on ongoing progress and completion, provides SPD policies, and allows the public to sign up for continuous email updates and submit questions on the plans. We have a part of it that speaks about early warning systems. SPD is designing a system where officers are given a threshold for each incident type. Should an officer exceed that threshold for that incident type, an alert will go to the Office of Professional Standards. These are all new people, new mechanisms, and new ways for you to see what's going on. Thank you.
Community engagement and relationship building.
Evening, Mark Russin with the Syracuse Police Department. I appreciate everybody coming on. I also want to acknowledge all the hard work from the committee. It's been very helpful for me as a supervisor within the police department to bring a lot of these topics to the committee, and then have feedback come back and make what I think is a better product in the end. So I do appreciate that. So the 2 milestones that are on the slide here, the first is cultural competency training. This was Chief Buckner was aware of Dr. Robert Strauss. He had received some of his cultural competency training when he was at Little Rock Police Department, and had a lot of great feedback from the rank and file officers at Little Rock. So he suggested we bring in Dr. Strauss. I went to the training. It was excellent training. So in September and October of 2021, Dr. Strauss did a kind of a historical snapshot of Syracuse, talked to some local community stakeholders, and then ultimately did some training within the police department. So all of the sworn officers were there. The non-sworn employees went to the same cultural competency training, which was kind of new for the Syracuse Police Department in terms of doing civilian training. and then also at the recruit level as well. So there was a through line between all sworn members of the police department, and that will be occurring again for this current academy class that's in session right now. In addition to the cultural competency training, the police department recruited, I guess is the best term, a civilian panel to be part of the hiring process for new recruits that are being onboarded with the police department. The panel receives training, and then ultimately, as we get to the end stage of the hiring process, the recruits will come to the community panel and be asked a battery of questions. The community panel provides feedback to the chiefs, who are the last step in the process, in the hiring process, and it's been invaluable for the chiefs to have that feedback from the community about the people that are going to serve within the community. So they've worked on 2 cadet classes, and they're going to be working on the 3rd here in July. The one milestone that's not on here that I do want to just make an acknowledgement of is the program. It's under Mayor Walsh's executive order for some training that's going to happen at the academy and in-service level. And Lemoyne College stepped up, and we've partnered up with Lemoyne College to do some training with them. That'll be coming out in August. We'll report back as we do on the dashboard. But I do want to acknowledge the work that some of the professors in Lemoyne College has assisted. Thank you.
Mark, I will just add to that the Lemoyne professors and the staff came to meet with the Oversight Committee, who gave them excellent feedback on not just creating a curriculum that talks about racism in the United States and Syracuse from a generic perspective, but that there are community stakeholders who live through the trials of racism on a national perspective as well as the local perspective. So as a result of this Oversight Committee's interaction with the Lemoyne staff and faculty, they are expanding that training, and we will be reaching out to some of you who have been identified to be a part of that process. Thank you, Mark.
Yes, ma'am.
Policies and procedures.
My name is Barry Gawanter, and I'm a civil rights advocate and a member of the committee. A couple of milestones in the area of policies and procedures. One, in the past, and still in many police departments, when there was a call, a dispatch, involving somebody in a mental health crisis, the terminology that was used was emotionally disturbed person, or the acronym EDP. There was some feedback given from this committee and also from some of the public forums that were held as the city and the police department and the mayor's office was forming this police redesign plan for as required by the governor. And part of that feedback was that calling somebody an emotionally disturbed person it's not respectful and it's dismissive. And so the suggestion came across from several people, find another term for that. And the city listened, the police department listened, and they have, through training and through communication through the ranks, they've made it clear that police officers should not use that term anymore. They're now using person in crisis, which is not as dismissive, not as demeaning, and the acronym PIC. The police department took the necessary steps to change how this terminology was used and to integrate that. Second thing, and this probably should have been bolded, but one of the other pieces of feedback that came through the public forums going into the redesign plan was that the police department in the past seemed unable to quickly get interpreters for people that spoke languages other than English. And police interactions with community members, there needs to be understanding both ways. This was also brought up by Maggie Russell, an interpreter for people who are deaf, as an issue. And the response that we initially got from police chiefs all over the community was, "Oh no, that's too expensive. We can't do anything like that." And Maggie and I both spoke up and said, "Wait a minute. There's an app-based program. You can pay by the minute. There's 2 programs out there. They're used all over the place. Please, will you look into it?" And the city and the police department listened and they looked into it. So now there were a couple of programs available. They chose the Voyance system and that particular company. And what that provides is on an iPhone or a cell phone, an officer or a supervisor can literally call up an app, select a language, and there are like 85 plus different languages that are available, and they can get either an audio or a video interpreter. That is a major, major step forward. So SPD purchased the Voyance app in February 2021, and the rollout with training and coaching on this began in the second quarter of 2021. And the app is being used, the service is being used. From August 2021 to December 2021, the app was used to translate over 100 minutes of conversation when there would not have been effective communication before. Currently, the languages that are most utilized, the interpretation that is utilized is in Spanish, Nepali, largely for the Bhutanese community, Arabic. We have many people from countries in the Middle East here, and also Somali. So that's a major step forward. Also, one of the commitments from the police department and the city was that there would be more transparencies about police department policies. Currently on the police website, you can find the use of force policy. You can find policies related to camera surveillance. You can look at a policy that is about interacting with people that are transgender. You can also look at the body-worn camera policy. But there's another step that is coming. The city is going to be creating a new website. They've been working on it for a while. They have a beta test up on the city's website, and I've gone on it, and they are going to be posting as early as next week a large number, a wide range of SPD policies on that website. That will be something that anybody can look at. You want to know, why do police do that? First thing you want to do is look at their policy. And that will be something that'll be transparent as early as next week. And you can get a preview of it on the beta test. And there's a link on the city website for that beta test. So go take a look. It's really a new level of transparency, and I'm very happy about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Mark, I'm going to just ask you really quickly to walk all of our viewers through the process that the SPD is going through right now to ensure that all policies are meeting 21st century, meeting all state, local, and federal laws. And can you speak to that just for a moment, please?
Sure. So when the Mayor Walsh and the deputy mayor came in, first, one of the first projects that I became involved in with specifically the deputy mayor was a transition over to a company utilizing a company called Lexipol to transition our old policy manual over to Lexipol based policies. The Lexipol policies are just the baseline. We make significant modifications to the policies to make sure that they're in compliance with New York State accreditation, state law, federal law, but then also as we move forward towards CALIA. We have a few internal working groups where we have subject matter experts who will review the policy, make sure that updates are added to it. It's consistent with our current practices. Maybe we'll change practices based upon the information that's in the policy. And one thing that I think we've done significantly different than any other policy that I've worked on is we intentionally try to target policies where we believe that we could have or benefit from community input. So the deputy mayor worked on the use of force policy and the body worn camera policy. The CRB, their recommendations that come out of the annual reports are regularly incorporated into policies. Barry Gawana worked on 2 policies: limited English proficiency and no, I forget the second one. Barry, you're gonna have to jump in. But so now we're intentionally targeting policies. As we review policies, we intentionally target folks in our community that come to the table and provide feedback, and then we incorporate that. So it's been a good process. I know that's probably a little bit more than what you wanted, but that's generally the workflow for SPD now.
The second policy was about communication with people with disabilities and people who are deaf,
Thank you
which were
both.
new policies for SPD.
Yes. Thank you both. Moving on, training and wellness, Councilor Majoke.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So being a police officer is a highly stressful job. I know that because I'm not a police officer and I get to watch them in distance. And that is because being a police officer, you get to see things that as normal citizen, we don't get to see every day. And those things can take a toll on officers' mental health. So as they go on every day, the department is conscious of that. What the department of the city have done is that they have appointed and located an officer to really look after the wellness of the officer as a full-time person. And in that, to go a little further in advancing and taking care of our officers, the city hired a psychologist, Ronald Fish, to be able to train the command leadership so that they are able to effectively supervise and look after officers, so that they are able to detect, if need be, things that are affecting officers' health. So with Dr. Fish as a psychologist helping our command officers, the city went as far as also as purchasing an app through the help of Common Council, purchase an app. And this app, what it does is that it tracks things like anger and stress that officers are going through. And the way it goes is the officers download the app on their phone, and they can use it with their families as well. And that's how they track that. So it's an effective mechanism to try to help our officers with their mental health. And so far, it has been used by our officers. And I'm gonna go through the numbers here to just show how far we have come as a city and as a department. When we first got the app back in 2020, there were 484 downloads when it first got launched. And this year, there has been 166 downloads so far. In total, to date, since November of 2020, there has been a usage of 3,452, and the visits to the apps after I believe after it has been downloaded has been 2,008. So this app has really helped us as a city, as a department, and we hope that this progress continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Majoke. Moving on, diversity in hiring and advancement. David Chapman. You're muted.
I will be the first one to do that. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll say on the front end, 3 or 4 years before this executive order came about, and the public was more intimately made aware of kind of how the civil service exam, to the extent that it employs officers, works. I was working in my capacity as director of civil service administration for the Onondaga County and director of employee relations as well with this administration to figure out, and with the police chief and officers trying to figure out what can we do to work together to push the state ultimately to change some of its exam structure such that it allows us an opportunity to have a more diverse force. So I'll leave with that. Some key takeaways so the public understands where we can use your assistance, because this is crucial. The county, Onondaga County, administers and manages on behalf of the state civil service law and state civil service rules. The state, the county dictate when a test occurs, usually on a schedule, for all under the Onondaga County jurisdiction. Now, that applies to all law enforcement serving in Onondaga County, towns, villages, and the school district, to include the city of Syracuse. So, meaning all change, reform to civil service rules specific to SPD requires the county and the state's assistance to make those changes. And that's where we, ask the public, speak with your local county rep, local state rep, to work on these same initiatives I'm going to highlight here. So that said, January 28th, 2001, this administration is working with the state to pass residency requirement for the first 5 years an officer is on the force. Now, it hasn't been passed yet at the state level, but in the meantime, the city successfully negotiated with the police union to pass, and they agreed to it, and council passed this contract to have officers in the first 5 years on the force be residents of the city of Syracuse. That's progress. That's something that the city has never had before. That will greatly benefit the experience officers have and understanding officers have for the dynamic that people in the city go through, and not just work in the city and go home to the suburbs, although that can happen and will happen. We think that experience is crucial. Also, I'll add that the city reached out to the state, kind of a mea culpa, to get an assessment, trying to add a criteria to the score. So it's not just a raw score that differentiates who's of the top 3 is available and reachable by the police department. That was denied. That is a violation of civil service law as it stands today. And we're still awaiting rationale on why that is, in fact, a violation, to be specific. Lastly, state civil service acknowledges there have been cultural biases in the test itself. They acknowledge that along racial lines, being specific, people of color don't do as well, right? That being the case, they're working on changing that for police officers and the police exam specifically. So far, that change has only come to the fire department. And they've been working under this for, I believe, 1.5 years or so. And the jury's still out on how effective it is at having officers of color do well, fire officers of color do well on those exams and be reachable and able to join the ranks of their peers. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Just to reiterate, I can't stress how important the issues that David just pointed out around civil service examinations affect every position in municipal government, whether there are school district, city, or county positions. And those exams are a requirement for the majority of those positions. And they are not free, which is the other barrier. And so again, to David's point, it is state law overseen by the county. And so these two bills that we outline here are in committee now, and we hope that they will be moved forward. But even beyond that, comprehensive civil service law reformation needs to happen. Thank you, David. And alternatives to policing. Come on.
Hi, everyone. Kimone Jordan, Director of Neighborhood Housing and Planning in the Department of Neighborhood and Business Development. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the sixth and final component, alternative to police response. So SPD and the administration approached this twofold, first through crisis intervention training, and secondly, through creating a diversionary response program. So currently, this component came about with an understanding that when a mental health crisis call comes into 911, SPD isn't always the right team to be dispatched and to address people with mental health crisis. So currently, officers that have less than 5 years of service are undergoing a crisis intervention training. So this was something that was first outsourced, but now we're happy to report that SPD does have a lieutenant and a sergeant that are both fully certified to instruct officers. So in April 2021, we had 15 officers certified, and then in April 2022, this year, we had 12 officers certified. So the second part of alternative to police response is the creation of a diversionary response program. So I do really want to take my hat off to Deputy Mayor and all the work that she did around engaging a working group to address the diversionary response program. So she met with community stakeholders, mental health professionals, and the county, first to analyze local data from 911 calls, but then to also study models in other cities and conduct informational interviews to understand how we can develop a program that's tailored towards the needs within Syracuse, New York. So as a committee convened for the past year, they realized that an effective diversionary response program was threefold. So first, you need a strong peer response. So when a call comes into 911, we need to make sure that those calls are being effectively triaged. Second, we need an effective response. So we need to make sure that the right teams are on the ground to help people experiencing a mental health crisis. And then third is post-response. So after the event or the occurrence happens, we're asking how we can provide individuals with wraparound care, support, and services so that we can prevent that event from occurring again, but also just give them the resources and tools that they need to do better. So just to give you some timeline, in 2021, the city entered into a contract with Liberty Resources for them to deploy their mobile response team. And that was for calls with individuals in crisis brought on by either a mental health condition or situation or substance use. So that will actually continue in 2022. And then I also want to announce that May 9th this year, the Common Council actually approved the use of ARPA funds or American Rescue Plan Act funds for the city to enter into a contract with Contact Community Services. And through this, we are placing a staff member in the 911 call center, and their responsibility will be to triage those calls that come in. So right now, as the working group convened, they've developed a pilot program or in the process of developing a pilot program where there will be a team of 2 that is deployed 5 days a week for 11 hours a day. And I believe their shifts will be tiered. So as we run this pilot program, the goal will be to assess the cost, assess the workflow and steps in response, assess demands and also gaps in programming, and then use that pilot to implement something permanent. So our goal is to scale out to a program that runs 24 hours a day and 365 days a year. So with that said, I'll see if Deputy Mayor has anything she'd like to add from her experience working with the team.
No, I'll just add that while we heard so much feedback from the community, this was a very big priority. And I was pleased to say, to report that the police department completely agrees. There are incidences in our community when 911 calls come in, calls come into the 911 center, and there are individuals in crisis. They're having some issue that's going on that is causing some situation that has prompted a resident or someone else in the community to call the 911 center. Syracuse Police Department is the first to say that that individual does not need an armed police officer. They need a mental health professional. And so the partnership with Liberty Resources over the past year has been outstanding. The Syracuse Police Department to date still gets the call from the 911 center and they go to the scene. Through all of that CIT training that we talked about earlier, we are able to assess at the time whether or not there is an imminent danger to the individual or to anyone else. And if there is not, the police department, who has Liberty Resources on speed dial, gets them to the scene. And they have been very efficient in responding in a timely manner. It is at that point that those two organizations collaboratively discuss the situation with each other, and Liberty Resources determines that it is a scene in which they wish to take control. SPD backs off and gives Liberty Resources the control of the situation. In that time, Liberty Resources does what they're trained to do to assist the person to get to the services they need to help them. One thing that we'll continue to work on is that, because in some instances, the individual needs to still to get to some crisis treatment at a hospital facility or a clinic or a doctor's office, they need to be transported. And in many instances, the individual cannot be transported. And the only car that's there is a police car. And people don't want to get in a police car. So that's another, when we talk about gaps and analysis, is identifying another means by which we can transport people. So we'll continue this work. We are thrilled to be able to I've had the question asked of me, why Liberty Resources? Just some history on that. In 2020, during the pandemic, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, issued what was called CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, CB funding. So it was basically CDBG funding, very much targeted for COVID relief. We all remember when we were shut down, we had pantries, we had working with the food bank, working with senior organizations, working with disability organizations to ensure people were being cared of. So HUD provided funding. During that process, as we always have to do with HUD funding, we issued an RFP seeking individuals who would like to provide support services for programs. Because it would be considered an extension of a contract, though that offer was given to individuals that were already under contract with the city of Syracuse through Neighborhood and Business Development. Liberty Resources, providing support services to our homeless population, submitted an application because they saw during the pandemic, one, because so many therapy and mental health clinics were closed down and not doing in-person care, and because the crisis of just everyone being shut in, we really began to weigh on some people. And so they proposed this mobile outreach relationship specifically to work with the police department. And so as we continue with the pilot, we're going to continue to build upon what we already have found successful. The city of Syracuse operates through the AG's office funding for 2 years, I believe it was, a neighborhood ambassador program to assist us with our code enforcement efforts. So many of you know that in those situations, there needs to be a bridge between the individual who rents the apartment and their fear of retaliation from the individual who owns the apartment. And so the neighborhood ambassadors do an amazing job in making that bridge and making the tenants aware of the services and making code enforcement aware of issues. And there have been some high profile apartment buildings that those neighborhood ambassadors have been pinnacle partners for us with. We talked to Liberty Resources about that neighborhood ambassador motto, and they absolutely love it. So as we begin to develop the scope further, we're going to be looking for neighborhood ambassadors to be a part of that program, because neighborhood ambassadors know, they may not be the mental health professional, but they know the block. They know the neighborhood. They know many of the people in the neighborhood by name. And so I'm very proud of this work that's been done. We will continue this work. We will continue to tweak the model and to identify the funding. And so thank you all. Ways you can read the plan in the flyer, there was a QR code that you can scan it, and the bit code also that can take you to the website. But before we open it up finally for questions, I want to show you the website. Committee, do you see that website? Make sure I did it right. Thank you. This is the website. And so on this website, it says right there, reporting on progress. And so it has various components, an introductory tab, the mayor's executive orders, and where we are right now, the reform and reinvention plan. As you scroll down, there is a scale by which we can know where we are in the process of being able to meet the promises and meet the milestones that we said we were going to meet in our reform and reinvention plan. Whether we're kicking it off in the planning stages, implementing, completed it, or what most are, monitoring and ongoing, because police reform never stops. So in the page, you'll see the breakdown of the status, the milestone dates, descriptions, and where we stand for each one of the 33 actions. And you'll see them broken down by transparency and accountability. And you saw that we went over a few of a couple of these today: community engagement and relationship building, policies and procedures. And I'm going to take a moment just to show you something. So if you click on this, it'll take you to a description of where we stand. And we continue to add bullets depending on what we've done to improve and increase what we set as a milestone. This line, policies are being regularly updated and available for viewing here. You click on that here, and here you have Syracuse police policies. They're in alphabetical order. If a Z policy is ever developed, there will be a Z policy. But if you go here, B, for example, you see a list of all of the policies that we've had. And if they're posted here, they have gone through the process that Mark outlined with Lexapol to ensure they are up to date. And so I encourage you, as Barry mentioned earlier, to go through here and take a look at the policies that are identified here on the website. And so with that, we are going to get out of this. I'm going to get out of this and open up the chat line for questions.
So I can read off the first question from.
Thank you.
Yep. So the first question: has the wellness of citizens who have been victims of police brutality been discussed or addressed at all? I'm not sure if Barry wants to weigh in on this one.
I will weigh in on that. So the wellness of citizens in our community is a priority. Our plan, the 6 components of the plan were laid out by the governor's guidance. And so that's why the officer wellness is part of this plan, because that was laid out as a component of the governor's guidance for all municipalities putting this plan together. I believe wholeheartedly that well, healthy police officers will be in a position to better serve and serve to the best of their ability our community. I believe that wholeheartedly. Chief Cecil has said repeatedly that due to the call volume and the numbers of officers we have on the force, we find ourselves in a situation where they're going from one call and going immediately to another call. No ability to de-escalate, no ability to stop for a minute and process what call they just left to leave another. Many officers come on to their shift, calls already in the queue. So I really believe that the reason why wellness of officers is identified in this plan is because it was the guidance that was provided to us by the governor's office. Absolutely, the wellness of our community is important without question.
Okay, the next question from the YouTube chat. The Right to Know Act requires release of data on stops. It appears there has been only data released for Q2 2021 and Q1 2022. When will the city release the data for 2021 Q3 and 4? And that was seconded by someone else.
Mark, can you take that one, please?
Yeah, sure. So we put
Okay.
out, when that right to know became law, it was passed by the common council, we had requirements, as the person mentioned, to put out certain quarters. But there was a delay, and I thought Mark would know best, and we'll look into it for sure, but I thought we've met the requirements of the quarters that we put out. Those two that the person asking the question mentioned don't make much sense because they're in between the two quarters that we released. So we'll certainly look into that unless Mark knows exactly what quarters have been released and what we need to do.
No, Chief, you're correct. I'm appreciative of the feedback. I'll work on that tonight, and we'll get it done by the end of the week. We have the data.
So also know, audience, that we're taking notes about anything that you notice or ask questions about that we need to address.
Okay, so the next question, how adequate are the capabilities of Liberty Resources to respond to the number of calls where their skills are needed?
I can
So-
jump.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor. I just from the perspective that I have, we haven't had an issue where they were not accessible, or that they were overwhelmed in the call volume, and that we were turned away that I'm aware of. I certainly can look into that with one of our liaisons, Lieutenant Stephen Abbott, but it's never been brought to my attention, Chief C. So I don't know if it's ever been brought to your attention, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, so I'll just say it was brought to my attention that there were a couple of times where they were unavailable over a weekend. And I don't believe, Deputy Mayor, that they're even working on a weekend, although they have been responsive even on weekends when they're not working as part of this response. But there were a couple of times when they just weren't available. But again, outside of the hours where they're specifically working for SPD or for the city.
So thank you for that, Chief. So that's something I can follow up on. The other thing is that Liberty Resources serves 5 counties, and we have them under contract to have a team specifically for the city of Syracuse, which is what Kimon reported on. However, that's not the only team that can respond if they're available. The ultimate thing, again, the ultimate goal of diversionary response is our ability to have response 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. What this pilot is telling us already is the need for weekends.
Yeah.
I will also say, Chief, excuse me. So people, when we were going through months of this analysis, the 911 center was phenomenal in providing us call information and basically breaking it down for that former code that Barry, that we switched. And what we found was exactly counterintuitive to what I believed, and probably what many people believed, is that the bulk of the call volume was during quite frankly, business hours, Monday through Friday, during the course when people are out and about for the most part. And so that was counterintuitive, which is why it's always great to be able to have data to what I assumed to be the biggest need would be Friday to Sunday. It was not. It was absolutely during the peak of the hours when people are in neighborhoods, in downtown, across the city, in the morning through the evening.
Yep.
Yeah, not only that, Deputy Mayor, is to also say that, you know, in terms of liberty resources being effective, part of this pilot is to figure out if that is the case. But so far, what we know is that they can do it. But we'll find out by the end of the pilot.
We could also find out at the end of the pilot that while Liberty Resources has a mental health staff and ability, there may have to be developed also an extension of that service to provide follow-up, to actually, I call it right now the Navigator program, that is the community-based, knowledge-based, neighborhood-based component of that could be expanded absolutely to provide additional support.
So someone asked sort of as a follow-up, is Liberty Resources not currently available 24/7? So Deputy Mayor, can you speak to a little bit of the work that they do now?
So currently they're available 24/7, but they're spread over 5 counties. So to ensure that we could have them commit to the city of Syracuse through those peak hours of Monday through Friday, we identified ARPA funds to be able to pay to keep them here. Now, for that time frame, they still have their other outreach teams, some in the city, some in the county, that are throughout those 5 counties. And the other thing is that the county is working to fund additional mobile response teams from 2 other agencies to be able to build upon what we're talking about. So to understand mobile, the diversionary response, the government oversight of mental health services in our city and in our extended county is Onondaga County. And so they have very much been a partner with us in really looking at the services, again, as Kimon mentioned, pre-response, during the incident response, and post, which is most important. One data set that we were getting is really taking a look at what addresses were we responding to before the mobile response that SPD was responding to, and since, that we were repeatedly going to really think to the process and really examine how environment may be triggers for some crises that people are in. Renette?
I would like to say, in tandem with this, when the city began to understand the interaction between the public and the police and what was occurring and the relationship, the history that the public had with the police, they began to think of ways of improving those relationships. So some of these diversionary programs, adding Liberty Resources to it, was that type of answer to that, was to say, hey, we know that in the past there has been experiences with the police when there's persons in crisis, that it's necessary to have somebody else other than SPD to arrive in order to think about the health of the individual involved as well as the officer in responding to this particular situation. So that was looking at the interactions and thinking, we need a better alternative, or else we're going to continue to traumatize both individuals involved, the police and also the person in crisis. And when I say the police, meaning that they are now trying to function in a way, dealing with somebody that is under a person in crisis, that is not where they have their best skills. So we wanted to utilize somebody who had some better skills in dealing with persons in crisis. And that is not always the police, where you don't need a officer to show up with a badge and a gun in order to remedy the situation. When we look at the crisis intervention training that the police department has received, that is also looking at how the officers are responding in these situations and providing them with better tools when they are interacting with persons in crisis. So those were two things when we began to think about what the community had experienced with the police department that we felt were remedies that were necessary and able to be put forth right now. We are going to the administration is going to continue to look at other alternatives that we can utilize to continue to look at the public's perspective with their interaction with the police. But as of right now, this is what we have to work with and what we focused on currently.
I would
So
just
again,
add that
I would say go to that dashboard, put in the feedback of any other program that you think may be something that you would like the administration to look at, you would like the Oversight Committee to look at. We'll look into those programs and see whether or not that could be a good fit for Syracuse. We all know that Syracuse is unique in many ways, so we can't just bring cookie cutter programs here. We have to make sure that they work for Syracuse, and that one, we do not want to begin something that we cannot sustain. So we have to look at all metrics and all measures before we try to just put a Band-Aid on something that's a deep wound.
Renette said everything I was going to say.
Awesome. So one of our next questions, can we have more info released online on the diversionary response program?
Absolutely. What I can provide to the public, the Liberty Resources presented to the council. They have a slide deck of the services they provide, not only for the city of Syracuse, but Onondaga County, because that's what I asked them for. So that's what they pulled together. I can upload that on the site to make sure that you are aware of the services that they are providing. We're still in the contract development phase for the full scope to continue on. They have their current contract with the city through NBD ends in September. So we're in that in between contract phase, and we're working on solidifying that contract. We're really looking at and expanding what they're doing now with that neighborhood ambassador model.
So another question, can you speak more on this partnership with Lemoyne College? What is its purpose? What is the function of this partnership, and which department at Lemoyne are you working with?
I'll take that one. Yeah, it's so as part of Mayor Walsh's executive order, and I'm going to try and pull it up here while I'm talking at the same time to give the specific requirement under the mayor's executive order. But it's to teach the history of race and racism in policing, not only nationally but here in Syracuse is probably the best synopsis that I can give. We worked with we tried to reach out to several institutions. Lemoyne was the first institution to step up. We had a meeting with the college president, and then there's 3 folks that are working on there. They're from the philosophy department and 2 from the criminology department. And so what we did is we're building this from the ground up. There isn't a program like this that I'm aware of in New York State law enforcement training. And what we wanted to do is do some kind of a theoretical academic understanding, historical perspective, but then also do some practical application as well too. One of the folks that's on our team is Hannah Gardy from the I team there at the city of Syracuse, and she's been working with myself and a detective, Brian Grimsley, with this program. But the Lemoyne College folks have been really doing a tremendous amount of work. They're busy folks up there as professors, and what the goal was to create 4 2-hour training blocks that would go to the officers in a pilot program. The Lemoyne professors, to their credit, were very, very aware that they needed to have community input in the program. And so the first step of that community input was to bring the program to the this committee here. So they did a presentation to this committee, and it really provided significant feedback for the professors. The next step will be to leverage folks in the community that are known to members on the panel here, on the committee here, to review the product, and then to provide a second set of feedback. Ultimately, we'll present this information. I think it'll begin in August to the academy in this pilot program. This program I see as being fluid, similar to police reform that the deputy mayor and the mayor spoke about. One of the things that we don't want to have happen is something becomes stale. So we'll constantly be reviewing the program, trying to fine tune it to make it as constructive as possible, and to have as many practical applications and important lessons for the officers, especially officers that were not from the city of Syracuse. I say this all the time, that I did not grow up in the city of Syracuse. I got a canvas letter when I was 22 years old for Syracuse Police Department, and I moved here, and I maybe had been to Syracuse 2 or 3 times when I stepped into the academy. So I think it's important. I think it's another way that we can build relationships with the community. I have aspirations that we will have community members actually come and speak with the recruits while they're in their training. We've started to do this. Not only are we trying to gain or utilize folks in the community that are willing to participate in policy development that I mentioned earlier, but it's also helpful for the recruits to have folks like Barry come up and talk to them, have folks like Renette come into the academy. The deputy mayor came up for the first time to talk during our use of force block. And I think that the more perspectives, the more diverse we make our instructional staff, the better off the recruit will have for ultimately their training. And I would love to see that be part of this process. So Lemoyne they're doing more than getting us up off the ground. I certainly don't want to minimize it. They're doing a significant amount of work, but we still have a lot of work to do. We want to make sure that the program is reflective of things that have happened historically in the city of Syracuse, but then also nationally. And I would love to have people come in and actually speak with the recruits on some of those issues.
I'm going to add something to what Mark just said. Part of this is an attempt to have officers understand when people in the community react to the badge and react to the uniform, and it may have absolutely nothing to do with that individual officer, but there are legitimate reasons why people in the community would have attitude and assumptions about individual police officers. And that has to do with the history of interactions that were not necessarily positive. So if the officers understand a little bit more about the history of racism in police interactions in Syracuse, how patterns have affected people of color in the community, have affected refugees in the community, have affected people who speak other languages in the community, that may help the officers understand the reactions they're getting that have nothing to do with them as individuals, but have everything to do with what police have represented in times in our history, both past and fairly recent.
I just Barry made me think of something here. There's really a shift, if you will, that's been occurring for a while now. As the mayor said, some of the stuff has been going on for a long time, and training is usually a good venue in a police department that new programs are rolled out in. And a lot of our trainers are very progressive minded folks. And so they're actually working on an emotional intelligence piece with that goes kind of in the spirit of I think, Barry, what you were speaking of about this kind of this mindfulness understanding, which is definitely something above and beyond what the state requires for a police officer to become certified.
So those are all the questions in the chat. I'd like to ask the committee, so what are some takeaways that you have, having been a part of this group for a year and been able to provide some input on police reform?
I would go first and just state that we are progressing. We are making progress. We are acknowledging progress needs to continue to be made. We are having fluid conversations at the table. We are not just sitting idly by, watching this unfold and not providing feedback. And it has been received. So I'm hopeful as we continue to move forward, that this is just the beginning. And again, we will continue to add more things and more aspects to this. And I hope to continue to rebuild the relationship between the community and the police department as we continue to move forward. And that this group will continue to operate in its capacity to the best of our ability to make sure that we are listening to the community, receiving the feedback, and also providing legitimate feedback in order to give you what we believe you are looking for in terms of reform based upon the plan.
Any other committee member?
I'll just jump in and say I'm participating in this because what I have to offer is being listened to, taken seriously, and that has impact. And when I can do that, it's really satisfying. Bringing in the history that I have in my civil rights work into these conversations and have it be taken seriously. I think it's a step forward. There's still a lot of work to do, but it is a step forward. And I'm really happy that Syracuse has been one of the few municipalities around the state that seems to have taken this demand from the governor to create a redesign plan and submit it, and taken it not just as an exercise, but actually taken it as an opportunity for quality improvement. I'm really proud of my city for doing that, for taking this opportunity. And that's another reason why I'm participating.
I would just add to what Barry said, that if we are not the only municipality, we're one of very few that took our plan and created an oversight committee and have this type of relationship.
And if I just add one more thing, your feedback during those sessions is the reason why the CRB is on here. So that should be a testament to the fact that your voice matters. So we've asked for questions to be submitted. We've asked you to reach out on here and get updates as it relates to what we're doing. And that's for a reason. Again, I wouldn't be on here trying to sugarcoat this stuff as if we were making progress if we weren't. But we can only do as much as we know to do, in a sense, and as much feedback as you provide us when you look at this forward-facing dashboard and see things that you would like to see things that you let us know that you even though we think that it's easily accessible and we think that it's easy to understand, if you feel that it's not, please provide us with that feedback, and we will work our darndest to make sure that it is in a means so that you can get what you're looking for. And if not, we'll come back to the table and figure out how we can correct that. But your voice matters. So please utilize the forward-facing dashboard and please provide us with feedback.
And I just want to also add that, you know, one of the takeaway that I have here is the willingness and eagerness of the police department to want to participate in something like this, and their cooperation, their accessibility, and just willingness to see this happen at the top level. It started with Chief Buckner and now with Chief Cecil. So that's as most of you have said, particularly Barry, in terms of us being proud of our city. I think we are moving in the right direction. As we always said, still a lot of things to do, but I think that the willingness of the leadership to want to embark into this process is really eye-opening for our city.
But Counselor, I think it's important that this is not just a one administration exercise. I think that we need to make transparency and collaboration between the police and the public a hallmark of how Syracuse does business.
Mhm. Yes, agreed.
Yeah, along those lines, I'll add and echo what everyone has said. This experience has been great for me. I've had a lot of experience with working in the city and the county and understand kind of the scope and limitations of what we can achieve. But in reality, some light I would add is voting matters. This administration is not the last administration, not a shot at the last administration, but this administration has leaned into being a change agent. And the law, as an attorney, I can say the law is limited in what can be enforced and how it can be enforced. But that's where leaders step in and make change and hold themselves accountable, in addition to the accountability that's being held against them by the public. And I've been proud to be a part of this process and feel fortunate to have been part of that change agent process and part of the political will that your voting this administration in has provided us all.
Chief Cecil?
Yeah, so, I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor, I don't think I can add to anything anyone had said. And certainly, I want to thank all the members that took part in this because you did a lot of work. This was a tremendous amount of work that went into this police reform and reinvention. And secondly, I got to run to the east with TNT, so I'm going to have to sign off. Thanks
Thank you,
very
Chief.
much.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for taking the time out of your schedule to be here today. Please, 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 I heard Raynette say it multiple times, go to the website, continue to look at it. If you see that we're missing something, you brought up right to know reports, anything that you see that we're missing, the police reform, policy tab will continue to be populated. I'm not going to dare try to speak for Ruthnie. Maybe she can do it for us to talk about the transfer of the website, how all of that is going to work, because I'll mess it up completely.
Hi, yes. So my name is Ruthie Unger. I'm the communications director for the city. You all might have heard over the course of the past few years that we've undertaken a really big project to update the city's website, redesign it, make it more user-friendly, and just bring it into the 21st century. Some of the benefits of that is that SyracusePolice.org will be joining syr.gov. So all of that information will be in one place. You don't have to look for the information on the police website over here and then look for city information over here. So that transfer is happening over the course of this week. So by next week, you'll be able to go to one location and find information on the Syracuse Police Department. This also gives our police department way more control over their website and ability to update information quicker and make it more user-friendly, whereas we didn't have that capability before. So by next week, we'll publish more information on the Syracuse Police website, and you'll be able to do things like get to the public-facing dashboard for police reform from the Syracuse Police website, and we'll do our best to make sure that that information marries to each other really well. So as of next week, you'll be able to go to syr.gov and just search for police, search for this information, and it'll all be in one location.
Again, thank you so much for being here tonight. You have just gotten a snippet of all of the work that's been done. Please go to the website. You're probably sick of me saying that, but please, that is the place where we are placing all of the information so it is readily available to you, unprecedented access to the public for information from the city of Syracuse, from the police department. Please take full advantage of it. Again, use the site to make us aware of anything that we have overlooked or information that you're asking for that you don't see there. We thank you so much and have a great night. Thank you.